So I hope people listening, if you're listening to us on the podcasting sites, like, subscribe, share. If you're listening to us on one of the local radio stations, we hope you continue listening. We have a great guest on today, and I just told them before we even start taping, somebody I probably would have not even spoken to back in 2020, 2021. He's a very good documentary filmmaker. He's got a great movie out. It's the warontruthmovie.com, the warontruthmovie.com. The truth about January 6th, not what the mainstream media wants you to think. This is the truth from somebody that was there. Chris Burgard here on Fire Breather Rob. Chris, first of all, thanks so much for coming on the program. Greatly appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored.
So, Chris, I just want to tell you why I said that at the beginning, because I used to be very far to the left. I was a Bernie Sanders guy. I went to college, worked for the Democrat Party in Florida, was very much brainwashed throughout my college time. And then in 2021, I did get injured by the bioweapon that was put
Oh,
on
I'm
a lot of
sorry.
people. Yeah.
I'm sorry,
So,
buddy.
well, it's a curse, but it's also a good thing in a way, because I'll tell you what, Chris, that's what really made me wake up. If that didn't happen to me, I still would probably be chanting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and running around, pumping my fists up in the air. But I'll tell you what, the injury from the bioweapon, the gaslighting by the medical professionals that I saw, the trauma, medical, the people that I met that have even worse injuries than me, it really, Chris, opened my eyes to what the hell is really going on in this country. And the people that I thought, Chris, were just blowing a lot of smoke around, that were far right extremists, which is what they say on the mainstream liberal media, are the people that agreed with me on the bioweapon. They're the people that actually showed me common courtesy due to my injury. And they kind of opened, as I said, my eyes to, again, what the hell is really going on in this country. And that's why we want to get into January 6th. So I wanted to explain that to you before, because like I said, you would probably be somebody that I would never talk to, because I call it the liberal hysteria. And when you're in that liberal hysteria, it's very hard for you to escape, Chris.
Well, first of all, I'm going to pray that you're all right and that
Thank you.
you don't have any more problems. But Winston Churchill said that if you're not a liberal when you're in your 20s, you have no heart. And if you aren't a conservative by the time you're in your 40s, you have no brain. So, the switch that you've made is one I think a lot of us have gone through. Um, I'll say it right here now. When Bill Clinton first ran for president, I voted for him. I used to be a Democrat. But then, God's path for me and what I ended up doing as a career woke me up to a whole lot of information that would just scare the crap out of the rest of America. Um, when it comes down to it, knowledge is power. And right now we're in the greatest information war this country has ever been involved in. And when it comes to waking people up, and unfortunately, as happened to you, there's a big part of the population, you're never going to reach them by telling them the information. You have to show them. And God came down, put a needle in your arm, and he woke you up. Thank God you're still alive. There's other people that are not so lucky.
Agreed 100%. And just to put the exclamation point on this, Chris, I'll tell you what, my faith in Christ has always been there, but it wasn't as good as it is now. For instance, and I used to tell people this story because this has to do with the jab. The first time I got the jab for the first shot, I had these thoughts and this anxiety in my head. Don't do this. This doesn't seem right. And you know how much the fear and the pressure they put on people
Oh,
through
yeah.
Mass media, through family, through work. The list goes on. And I actually called quite a few people and said, this doesn't seem right. I keep having these thoughts. I think I'm losing my mind, Chris. And I obviously ended up doing the first one. The second shot, the same thing happened, that same anxiety. And I believe now, again, I didn't see it then because my eyes weren't opened as much as I thought they were to Christ at that time. I believe that was the Holy Spirit telling me not to do this. That was my sixth sense. Don't do this. And again, like I said, I didn't see that now. Well, we can cry for spilled milk for 100 years from now. It's not going to change anything. Like I told you as we started off, we have to just keep looking forward and trying to believe in Christ, spread the word of Christ, and just keep moving forward the best we can with life.
So I think you're 100% right. And what we're seeing in this country is more people moving back to our roots. I mean, remember, it was God that started this country. It was a bunch of refugees that fled oppression in Europe, that believed that resistance to tyranny was obedience to God. And what God did with you was very similar to what he did to me on my journey. He whispered in your ear at first with the first shot, don't take it. You didn't listen to him. Second shot, he tapped you on the shoulder. You still didn't listen to him. When you got sick, he punched you in the freaking stomach. That's how it works. When I went to make the War on Truth, I don't know if you knew this, but my partner Nick Searcy and I, being there on January 6th, I had been in Central America when they tried to overthrow a regime down there in Central America. So on January 6th, I had a lot of buzzers and whistles going off and things were going on. I turned to my wife, I said, honey, I've seen this before. And that night when they rolled out the narrative, the fake narrative, it was like they're stealing this day in history, just like they stole the government. That was a movie called Capital Punishment, most censored movie of 2021. People wanted us to make a sequel, and I just wasn't feeling it. And again, God whispered in my ear, nah, he tapped me on the shoulder, nah, I don't know what the ending would be. And the gut punch in my stomach was, here I am, I'm 62 years old, award-winning filmmaker, from a law enforcement family. I've worked with military and intelligence services and law enforcement up and down our border for 20 years. And the FBI comes a quarter mile into my ranch to investigate me, and I find out I'm the subject in a federal terror investigation into the national security of the United States of America because I made a movie. That's really where we're at. That was God's gut punch to me. And after that happened, and after we got a little bit of the pressure off my family, Nick and I sat down and we're like, well, holy heck, if they're doing this to you, Chris, what are they doing to everybody else that we haven't talked to in the last 2 years? And as you'll see in the movie, the pressure, and it wasn't fun, that my family and I went through being investigated by the FBI, and it's not over yet. They won't close the case. And DOJ has said they want to arrest a whole bunch more people. But the pressure that we went through is nothing compared to what you're going to see in the War on Truth. In the War on Truth, I mean, you see people have lost their children, they've lost their marriages, they've lost their homes, their jobs, they've lost their lives. And this is all with the weaponization of the federal government. And you and I talked about earlier about how knowledge is power in an information war. What we learned making January 6th was so much bigger than even that day. I first thought, well, if we can just show America who planned January 6th, why they did it, where else they've done it, and how it's affecting Americans, that would be the film. Well, God had other plans. What we found out was when somebody says they're going to fundamentally transform the United States of America and they become the next president, you better listen to them. Because what we found out making this movie is this is a march towards totalitarianism. Underneath the, and stop me if I start going too long. My wife says I blow weed, so just put your hand up or something. I'll get it. Under Barack Obama, I don't know if you remember this, but his DHS director was a woman named Janet
Napolitano, right, from Arizona, right?
Yep. Somebody you think would know about the border and child trafficking, correct?
Right.
So Janet Napolitano, remember, this is when we're being attacked by Al Qaeda, by ISIS, Fort Hood shooting, all these, Islamic terrorist things are going on. We're engaged in a war on two countries, in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they come out with these fusion reports. And the fusion reports are basically the federal government's white papers, strategies for interacting and coordinating with state and local law enforcement. In these white papers, underneath Barack Obama, they said the three most dangerous threats to the security, the national security of the United States of America, was one, pro-secure border enthusiasts, two, Christian pro-lifers, and three, returning veterans. And at the time, I'm thinking, okay, I know they don't like us very much, but the Minutemen at the border, so they try to make them vigilantes. That never happened. Pro-lifers, I've never seen anybody bring a knife, let alone a gun, to a pro-life march in Washington, D.C. And, returning veterans, yeah, some guys come back with PTSD, some women, but, we get them help. So that didn't make sense to me until we started making this movie. We start making this movie, and we're interviewing some of the first J6ers that have been in prison over 2 years, waiting for trial. 2 years in prison without a trial. And we start talking to these guys, and who are they? They're pro-secure border enthusiasts. They're Christian pro-lifers. And several of the first ones we did, the majority, were returning decorated combat veterans, special forces guys. And this is, then all of a sudden it makes sense. When you set out to fundamentally transform the United States of America, these are the people you have to go after. You have to go after the Christians because they answer to God before they answer to the government. You have to go after the Christians and patriots because we know that our rights come from God and are guaranteed in our founding papers, that they don't come from the government. And you can see the psyop in action just by watching the news. 2 months ago, I was watching MSNBC, and they had a producer. I believe she was from Politico, and the question to her was, why do Christian nationalists pose such a threat to the security of the United States of America? And she said, well, it's because these people actually believe that their rights come from God, not the government. Can you believe that? And it's like, oh my Lord, my head's about to explode.
I don't comprehend all that stuff, Chris, because, when these people are atheists, I don't know where they believe things come from. All this great, these great people. How did these people come about? How does a man and a woman make a baby? I know that's very far-fetched now because it's a man and a woman and a woman, transgenderism. I mean, all that is a whole different ball game in general.
That's a whole conversation
control. Yeah, but that's population control. But regardless of that, it's really sick what's going on. And I kind of want to just dive into January 6th. So, you were there. Tell the viewers, again, and the listeners too, a firsthand account of what the heck was going on. Did you see President Trump speak and walk?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
I saw President Trump's speech, and we didn't plan on making a movie about this, but I'm a documentary filmmaker, and Nick and I, it wasn't until 2 days before January 6th we decided to go. I was like, dude, I'm telling you, I'm feeling called to be there. God's tugging at my heart. So I brought my wife, my daughter. I gave them both cameras. Nick had his iPhone. And it's like when people see, and this is all part of dispelling and fighting the PSYOP, the propaganda war that's going on. In the first movie, when liberals see it, a lot of them don't cry when Ashley Babbitt dies, but they cry when her dog dies. And in this movie opens up just as Trump finishes speaking, and everybody's leaving, and they're dancing to the YMCA. And the village people. And there's nuns, and there's dancing nuns, and there's kids in strollers, and everybody's dancing. And I've had people on the left say, how did you edit it to make it look like people were dancing to the YMCA at the end of Trump's speech? I'm like, because everybody was dancing to the YMCA.
First of all, I've watched tons of Trump speeches, and everyone knows at the end of the speech, it's the YMCA.
Right.
If you watch the Trump speech from 2020, that's the last song. He walks off the stage, does his little jig move, and he cuts out. I mean, this is common sense, but go ahead.
You're talking. See, here's the difference. You're talking reality. I'm a director. Been doing this for a long time. The other people are watching a movie. And in the movie, the script is Trump incited people to violence that day, and they stormed. They ran the entire mile all the way down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol with pitchforks and nooses. And they wanted to attack the Capitol. That's what people believe. I talked to a roommate of mine a couple of weeks ago. It's a wonderful person. Her and her husband are Hollywood A-listers, great folks, think out of the box. Mm-hmm. And we were talking, and she said, yeah, I saw your last movie, or I heard your last movie did really good. And I was like, oh, thanks. And I said, it's been pretty censored. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, when we were there. And she goes, wait, you were at January 6th? And I said, yeah, I was there. So was my daughter. So was my wife. And there's dead silence for 2 minutes. I said, are you still there? And she goes, I had to sit down. I can't believe you're an insurrectionist. I thought I knew you.
Oh,
it's like, oh my God. You go watch the movie. You have to see how badly you've been lied to. And what happens, like in the moment when Ashley Babbitt's dog dies and the people on the left start crying, it drops the scales from their eyes and they see the truth. The truth of that day was Trump never said attack the Capitol. He says, go peacefully make our voices heard. And it was interesting. And this is part of, you have to look at the war game and how this was all, people knew it was coming ahead of time. Trump was an hour late coming on to speak. And then he
Right.
spoke forever. And then he started his stump speech over. And we're like all freezing and sitting in the rain going, okay, what's going on here, right? But then it all plays out because while we were there still listening to his speech is when the breach happened. And all the photographers, and this is what set me off walking down Pennsylvania Avenue, there were no photographers. Usually you're tripping over CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. There were zero camera crews in that mile from the ellipse to the Capitol building. And I told my wife, I said, I got a bad feeling. This is like back in Honduras when they tried to overthrow the airport. And I was like, where's the media? Why aren't they covering this? This tells me they're pre-staged somewhere to cover an event we know nothing about, because all the images you see of 2 million people singing Kumbaya and praying and walking with people of all different colors, those aren't the images they want out.
Well,
And that's
Chris, that's the
exactly what
same
happened there.
thing they did with the assassination attempt. Those people were not covering the speech. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, they were not covering Trump's speeches. All of a sudden that day, all those media organizations were at that speech for somehow, some
And
way.
and
Right.
what else? It wasn't just they covered it, it was live.
Right, true. Because they
Right.
wanted to get that clip. They wanted that JFK clip.
And instead, what did they
Unfortunately.
get? They got this.
Yeah. Okay, I see it. Yeah.
By the way, if you want these shirts, you can get them from hisglory.me, hisglory.me. I'm the CSO with Pastor
Oh,
Dave
okay.
Scarlett. It's an amazing organization. Um, I'm so glad you brought up the similarities because, we live in a world where yesterday's conspiracy theories are today's spoiler alerts. And what we saw and what I know from working with law enforcement in the military, just 101, security 101. The night before the J6, you go through the grounds, you take away anything that could be used as a weapon, construction materials, 2x4s, metal rods, bricks, fire extinguishers. 30 years filming in DC, I've never seen fire extinguishers on the steps of the Capitol, right? Same thing. So somebody's not doing their job here. And this is either gross negligence on the part of a very professional law enforcement agency, actually several agencies, in fact, or something's up. It puts your flags up, right? Same thing in Pennsylvania at the shooting. There is no way in heck when you do presidential detail like this, and I know guys that work Secret Service, I know guys that used to liaison 3-letter agencies on protecting VIPs and at the Capitol. Your perimeter goes out 1,500 meters. 1,500 meters. That roof was 138 yards from the president. And you never, ever, ever see the high ground. So that the fact that that was done is my friends who are very close to this have said, it's beyond gross ineptitude. They won't come out and say that this was something that was done with help on a government level, but they will go so far as to say this is grosser ineptitude than they've ever seen before. And yeah, it makes you wonder. January 6th, we proved that it was years in the making, and we showed how Ukraine in 2014, color revolution to take over the Ukrainian government was practice. It was dress rehearsal for what happened on January 6th. Those same thoughts, everybody that I know in 3-letter businesses in the military have the same thoughts about Pennsylvania and that shooting. Yeah, and isn't it interesting how the patsy always has 3 names? Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm a patsy. Boom. Then they killed him. What was the guy's name on the roof? Charles Matthew Crook.
Yeah. It's crazy, but I'll tell you what, Chris, it's really sad what's happened to this country, not just in the past 4 years, but even before that, but especially in the past 4 years. And I do want to tell people that are listening, it's the warontruthmovie.com, the warontruthmovie.com. Chris Burgard here, and we're going to have him on again, God willing, hopefully, because he has many other documentaries. Love to talk to you on immigration sometime, especially the hot topic that is.
Want to do a 5-minute hit on that real quick?
Yeah, sure thing.
All right. Because I've spent 20 years up and down the border. This is how I got blacklisted in Hollywood. In 2005, I was working on my ranch with some fellows that turned out to be here illegally from Mexico. And I'm practicing my Spanish with them. And what they told me was they came to America because the cartels took over the village in Mexico. And if you didn't work for the cartels, you didn't work. And it wasn't safe for them to have their wives and their daughters run around the village because cartels would rape them and the police would do nothing about it. And when they got to the border, they said, you're handed a backpack of drugs and they put a gun to your head and say, you're going to carry these guns in the United States as the price of admission, or we're going to blow your head off and leave you here in the desert. That's what prompted me. I'd never done a documentary before. I was a Hollywood guy, went down to the border with a bus and cameras, and basically just spent the next couple of years back and forth on the border and working with law enforcement, working with Border Patrol, working with a lot of different folks. And that's when I found out how the world works, because they attacked my wife and I. Now you're talking about, you made the transition from left to the right. And not only did I vote for Bill Clinton, I used to be a ballet dancer. I wore tights for a living, you know? And so I know the liberal arts world. I lived in that. And, I made movies and TV shows for a living. I used to be on a show called Growing Pains. That's how I paid for stuff. And what I saw at the border, I naively thought we discovered all these things, from the rape trees to the cartels and to the violence and what was going on. And I thought, okay, this is easy. I just show what's happening. We're going to put it out in theaters, and we'll take it back, and we'll show it, to all the people in Washington. They'll see how evil it is. They'll fix the problem. Wrong. Instead, what happens? My wife and I get demonized. All of a sudden, I'm not just a racist. I'm a nativist. I'm a xenophobe. I had to look that one up. I didn't know what that meant. People I knew for 20 years in Hollywood weren't returning my phone calls, and that was my the beginning of our journey into how the world and how this country is really run. When I got blacklisted in Hollywood and couldn't work, I got a call from Herman Cain's campaign manager, when they'd only had 3 hires on the staff, and they flew me out to Iowa. I met Cain, and he hired me the next day to do his creative and strategic media. We did his branding, we did all his commercials, and we were 21 points ahead of Mitt Romney on 10th of the budget before the deep state, destroyed him and ended the campaign. And that was the wake up to how the world really works. So my job for the last 20 years has been trying to open up the eyes of America, just tell the real stories. We actually did take that movie I made, Border. We screened for both houses of Congress and shocked the heck out of everybody in Congress. And it was actually used to help stop the 2007 Bush amnesty bill. Then last summer, I made another movie about the border called Death County, the River of Broken Dreams, with Tom Homan, who's Trump's ICE director, and he's going to be the new border czar. And this time we took it to Congress. It was sponsored by Troy Nehls, hell of a congressman out of Texas, where I live. And including Troy, only 2 other congressmen showed up. And the stuff that's in this movie shows you exactly, and this is my long-winded answer, it documents how the crisis on the border was set up. And it started way back in 2015 when Joe Biden went on a tour in Central and South America saying, give us your kids. And you see him in the movie on the front page of La Presa saying underneath, refugios menores, we will give refuge to your children. And now the result of that is, and when those caravans, remember under Trump, when the caravans in 2008 started hitting the border, we were paying for that. That was our own State Department laundering money into NGOs and through the UN to pay those people to come up here and organize this. And we documented Democrats down there saying, remember, when you come across the borders, the Democrats that got you, or the Democrats that got you here. The result of Joe Biden in 2015 going down a Give Us Your Kids tour is, under his administration, and these are facts, you can get them right out of DHS, over 456,000 unaccompanied children have come into the United States of America. Almost 500,000 children are here without their parents. That's on purpose. On top of that, they've lost another 86,000 children. They've lost. Where we had them, they were in federal detention centers, and they just gave them to people that came and said, hey, I'm Jose's dad.
This is sex trafficking then.
This is well, let's call it child trafficking, because I don't have.
Okay, true.
I can't prove the stats on whether these kids went to brothels or whether they went to sweatshops. I don't know what that percentage is. More, but I think goes to brothels. And I've been doing this 20 years. In the old days, when we would track bad guys in the desert, and I was not bad at doing that, and I worked with Border Patrol guys that were better than me. When we caught the bad guys, they were humping dope. Most of the time, it's just big square bales of pot, but other times it was heroin, and then sometimes they started doing crystal meth. But now, when we find, and they're still bringing that in, but they're using other ways. Now, when we catch these folks, like last summer when I was down on the border, I caught a group, and it's kids of the cargo, children. I ran into a woman summer before last in Eagle Pass, thought she'd gotten around everything. And she came with her teenage girl and 6 kids and a coyote that brought them across the river. And she looked at me, and this is a Hispanic woman. I think she might have been from Guatemala. I'm not sure. And she's carrying a very, very African child. I mean, not just, black. This is a very African looking child. And I looked at her and I asked her in Spanish. I said, "Is that is tu bambino? Is su bambino?" And she's like, "Oh, see," and she tells me it's her child. And I just looked at her and I went like this, and she burst into tears because she knew that I knew that she had trafficked that baby and the other 5 kids that were with her over the border, and she knew that I knew that little baby was going to be sex trafficked. And
Wow.
in that same area, when I was in that same area a few months before, there was a family from Africa that had come up, and the father's coming across the river, the mom's coming across the river. They got a 15-year-old little girl on his shoulders coming across the river. Current hits him. He can't swim. He starts to drown. Mom starts to drown. Border Patrol gets a boat in. They save the mom. They save the baby. She's not breathing. They get the baby breathing. They life flight him to the hospital where the baby dies, this little girl. 4 physicians examined this little girl. She had been raped anally and vaginally so many times that there was no separation from her parts underneath. And that's what she actually killed her. Investigating and talking to the people in the group that came over with them, they said this is part of the price that family paid to the cartel guys to cross that river. I spoke with.
Hold on. Sorry, I just gonna put this in perspective to people listening. So, Chris, you're saying that they're raping little babies, like 16-month-old kids?
15 or 16 months. We weren't sure exactly how old she was, but about
Oh,
yeah. But see,
jeez.
if you work the border, you know the stuff. Now this gets worse. The medical examiner couldn't do an interview with me as I'm talking to her because she's got a gag order from high up. I said, "How high up?" She goes, "I can't tell you. It's high." She goes, "Chris, I'm under a gag order. I can't talk to you about this little girl, but I can talk to you about the 3 other children that are sitting on slabs in my morgue right now if you want to come talk about them." And I'm talking to her when I'm having this conversation. I'm 73 miles north of the border in Falfurrias, Texas, Brooks County, where my buddy Sheriff Benny Martinez has so many dead bodies from people dying because of the weather and from being murdered by the cartels. So many bodies in this little tiny town of just a few thousand people that he has to have a FEMA morgue in his parking lot. And the last 2 times I've been there, it's been full. I'm tired of picking up bodies out of my pastures and my friends' ranches here in Texas. That is going on every day. This is how evil this is. Now, what tells you is not only is this evil, but when our own government puts pressure on our own officials, on our own citizens, not to talk about this, you know that there's a cover-up going on. And why is there a cover-up? Is it just because they don't want people to see how negligent they are? Or is it because, as the data shows, our U.S. government is now the largest business partner in child trafficking that the world has ever seen? And that's just a fact. That's just the data. The cartels have made more money under the Biden administration than they have ever made before. And the thing is about little kids, and I'm sorry to talk about this, but here's the deal. When you bring over a load of coke or pot or whatever you want, they go do it, they do the drugs, you sell it once, it's gone. You make your profit. And they're making billions of this. But you take a little kid over, you can pimp that kid out 5, 6, 7, 10 times a night until that kid dies. That's how this works.
Yeah. And I watched that movie from Angel Studios. I forget the name now.
Jimmy Caviezel's movie, The Sound of Silence.
Yeah.
You
And
should
The
have seen the
Sound of
first one.
Freedom, yeah. And
Sound of Freedom. Yeah,
you're
Sound of
right.
Freedom.
And they made that the guy that helped did that movie, the real true story guy.
Tim Ballard.
They were trying to make him look like a fool after and Disney owned that and they sold it. They didn't want that movie. It's just a joke. I
Almost
can't.
5 years. Almost 5 years it took them to get that movie. I saw it 2.5 years before they released it,
Oh
when it was
wow.
about
Okay.
20 minutes longer. But let me tell you something. They
Sure.
did such an incredible job with that movie. They
Right.
did more than 10 documentaries could do because it puts in their heart. That's a true story.
Yeah.
Tim is a hero.
Right.
And he's not the only one out there fighting this stuff. I've worked with 3-letter guys that have gone down to South America trying to get their people's kids back, trying to look for folks. I mean, but this is America's the worst. I mean, they wouldn't be bringing
Yeah.
all these kids here to traffic if it wasn't for if it wasn't because there's the consumer basis here. And besides sweatshops and going into brothels and stuff like that, and it's not even brothels now. What they do, they have apps, and you just order a kid like you order a pizza, and they'll bring that kid to your house. That's how it works now. Social media has changed everything, even on the border right now. When last time I was in
Yeah.
Arizona, I was with a sheriff's department, and they busted. He was a gangbanger from Long Beach, California. Got on an app, picked 3 people up here in Arivaca, get them to this point, and you get $5,000 a piece. We made $15,000 in one trip. Only he got busted. And so now, when we're in Arizona looking for people that are doing the trafficking, we used to look for old beat up pickup trucks or vehicles riding really low to the ground because the trunk was full with no license plate. Now you just look for the out of state plates because you got kids coming down from Washington, from Seattle, coming in. Like I said, this gang fellow came in from Long Beach, California, and it's all on an app. This stuff is just blown up. It's huge. So, and
Right.
the border you have to. I'm going to take your mind out a little bit farther, Robert. There's a great book out there. I don't know if you know General Michael Flynn. He's been in a couple of my.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
He's a good man. He and another fellow named Boone Cutler, who's another extraordinary fellow, wrote a book called The Citizen's Handbook to Fifth Generation War. And this is something we've been covering for a while. General Jerry Boykin was first pushing this. Jerry called it asymmetrical warfare, complete war. And he's like, we've been at war for years. People just haven't known it. And if you understand fifth generation war, and I hope everybody gets this book, then when you read that, everything makes sense. You see how the border ties into January 6th, how the pandemic ties into moving $14 trillion from the middle class to the elite. And you see how the vaccine mandate in the military was the most brilliant move that any enemy has ever done to the military of the United States of America. Because what did they do? They got our best special forces and hardest chargers and free thinkers in the military to say, heck no, and they were either mustered out or they're court-martialed. Those that took the jab are suffering health injuries like you are. Yeah. And the three-letter and the military folks that I've talked to, I've gotten estimates that our ability to react to a foreign threat has been degraded 23 to 37% because of the vaccine mandate.
Well, it's not even just the vaccine, Chris. It's also the obesity epidemic in this country. I mean, we don't have enough people to even serve whether they had the vaccine or not because they're all fat, obese. They have all these illnesses in general. So the military is a joke. Dick Durbin, actually, I shouldn't say former, I should say senator from Illinois, came out and said that's why they want all these illegals so they can put them in the military. That was the reason why Rome went down.
Yeah, well, you could learn your lesson with the with the legions and what happened, bringing all the Germans and the Gauls into and the Visigoths into the military. But it goes even deeper and bigger than that. And this is how big this thing is. When I'm talking about fifth generation war, this is total warfare. This is Sun Tzu on steroids. Why do we have so many obese and overweight and non-physical people in this country? It's culture. It's what's come at us, not just through video gaming and that,
pornography.
And it comes from it comes from the schools. We don't teach our history anymore. But earlier you said something about atheists and rights from God. Even if you're an atheist, if you had history classes that taught you about this stuff, you would know that no, it's just a fact. This country was founded by Christians. Read the declaration that the Pilgrims did when they came over in, what was it, 1624? I'm sorry, I may be off on that.
It's fine.
But there was no doubt that people fled Europe to come here for freedom and to come here for religious freedom. And then if you go 150 years later, when what's his face, is it Descartes? I'm having a senior moment. I'm also an ex-bull rider. I've had a bunch of head injuries, just letting you know. No, Tolkien. Alex de Tocqueville. Sorry, Alex de Tocqueville. Okay. When he was the French novelist and he came over here and they couldn't figure out why was America rising to super status power in just within decades of her founding? Why was she challenging the British Empire? How is this happening? And I'm going to paraphrase it from the 40,000 foot level. But he said, I toured America and I didn't find the secret to her greatness in her deep ports. I didn't find it in her fertile valleys. I didn't find it in the mountains. I didn't find it in her new hustling, bustling cities. He goes, Where I found the secret to America's greatness was in her pulpits. And the secret to America is she is great because she is good. And when America stops being good, she will cease to be great. And
I
that's
agree.
the war that's been going on. So you look at all these people are fat and can't do it. Not only are they not being taught their history, not only being taught civics and what a responsibility citizens are, but they're eating food that you couldn't buy in Russia or in Europe because of
Right.
the chemicals and the processing. You can spend, I mean, just in the last 3.5 years, your dollar now buys you 72, 73 cents worth of food at the grocery store. And the grocery store, you have food on the shelves that didn't exist 30 years ago. It wasn't around. Science made this. It's all processed. So you can go out and spend whatever money you have to buy groceries when you can't afford to fill up your tank, your vehicle, and you can still just kill your body with what you think is good food. That's all part of fifth generation war on the United States of America. But they do it in points that over there that makes you sound like you're a crazy person if you put those points together. But look at how fast conspiracies are becoming reality.
As we move towards the end of the interview, again, Chris Burgard here on Fire Breathing Rob. The website is thewarontruthmovie.com. Just changing back to January 6th, but I'm very happy we spoke a little bit about immigration, and we could do a whole show on that. I
Not
do want to
immigration.
do that show on
Not
with you on
immigration.
that.
It's bigger than immigration.
Oh yeah, well
Well,
that's true. That's true. Well,
so let's go back to January 6th.
it's the globalists.
Let
Well,
me talk
I want
about
to ask you this, Chris, though. Was that a false flag operation? We saw the cops usher in the protesters. They were taking pictures with the protesters. There was FBI obviously inside where Christopher Wray wouldn't do that. Obviously, people know the story about Ray Epps. I know there was a lot there. If you want to touch on some of those points that I just said.
Yeah, so when you run this together, you edit, if you want to put in the trailer to the movie there, you can pull it off the
Yeah.
website. You'll see when I tell you that this was run with military precision, all you have to do, and you'll see it in the trailer, you'll see the military precision extraction of Ray Epps from the front lines that day. They pop red smoke, which in the military means avalanche, means get out of here, cease operations. Ray's up at the front with this banner. They're pushing into the cops. That goes off. All of a sudden, 8 people appear, 4 behind him, 4 in front of him. They put their arms on the shoulders and they diddy mow their way out of there. And you see it in the movie. And it's like, he said he was there alone that day, just him and his nephew that got separated. Really? Well, who are those 8 people that came to your rescue? You'll see in the movie, we've got a guy in there, Dan from Chicago, that never thought he was going to be, part of going out in the Capitol, but he met Ray Epps and he tagged along with Ray Epps because he lost his buddies, and Ray Epps got him into a lot of trouble that day, and he's sitting in prison right now. What you'll see in the movie, like I said, you'll see how the overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014 was a dress operation, dress rehearsal for what happened on January 6th. And if we ever do have an investigation of this, it probably won't be done by Congress because there is no will in Congress to get to the truth of this. If you notice, we elected all these guys to come into Congress to show us and release the 40,000 hours of footage from the Capitol. That never happened. But maybe someday there'll be a military trial, but maybe there'll be an investigation because this is treason was committed that day. So let me just share with you 2 things that even before you see the movie, and I hope you see the movie and we can talk again because you'll be blown away when you see it. But there was a fella in history, I don't know if you remember him, maybe you know his name, who said that if you make the lie big enough and repeat it often enough, it becomes the truth to the state and then the people. That was a guy named Joseph Goebbels, and he worked for a guy named Adolf Hitler. They haven't changed the playbook. Let's just examine one single lie that they keep running with, and it'll tell you who's involved in, if not the orchestration, at least the cover-up. You've seen Joseph Robinette Biden. You've seen Kamala Harris. You've seen the Department of Justice. You've seen Chris Wray, and you continue to see the mainstream media say 5 law enforcement officers died on January 6th. 5 law enforcement officers lost their lives on January 6th because of this insurrection. That's completely false. Officer Brian Sicknick did not die from a pre-positioned fire extinguisher, that he wasn't bludgeoned in the head by a Trump supporter. Officer Sicknick, unfortunately, died the next day from natural causes. And from the people we talked to, he's a very wonderful man, and My prayers for his family. The other 4 police officers that are now deceased all died from suicides, and they died weeks and months after January 6th. So we knew this to be false in the first hours after January 6th. By January 7th, they knew Brian Sicknick wasn't bludgeoned to death with a fire extinguisher. Yet they kept pushing that same pre-scripted mantra over and over, and they're still pushing it to this day. Why do they do that? One, because it takes, the short-term reason is it takes away the focus of the 4 people that did die, the 4 Trump supporters. Roseanne Boylan, who you'll see in the movie, you'll hear her final screams before she dies. You'll see people doing CPR on her, trying to save her life on the Capitol steps. You'll meet former Tennessee Sheriff's Deputy Colt Maccabee and his wife. He was in prison for over 2 years before he got to trial. And if you ask him why that is, he's like, because I'm a cop. I know what those cops should have been doing. And if the cops would have been following procedure, she would still be alive today. But I'm in prison. I'm shut up. I can't tell people that. Okay. So Roseanne Boylan, dead. They don't talk about her. They wouldn't even name her. And then when they did, they tried to say she died of a drug overdose. Complete lie, complete fallacy. You have Kevin Greason and Benjamin Phillips, 2 gentlemen that died of heart attacks. One of them you'll see on camera. He's on, the Capitol's over here. The crowd's here. He's just standing here on the edge of the crowd, minding his own business. They launch a flashbang rocket over the crowd. It hits him in the chest. It explodes. It burns the man's face next to him. He screams, turns away. His face is burned. This guy goes down, and the next you see him, he's on a gurney. They're doing CPR, trying to get him out of there, and he dies. That's the reality of that day. And then you have Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt, first they wouldn't say her name. Then when they did say her name, they tried to say she was part of this bloody insurrection. Let me explain to you who Ashley Babbitt is. And I'm saying this because I'm very good friends now with her husband and her mom. Ashley was a 14-year Air Force veteran, 7 years active duty, 7 years reserve. I won't go into details, but she was injured in combat. This is a woman that bled for her country, okay? On January 6th, she goes to her death defending the United States of America and defending her oath to the Constitution. What you'll see in this movie, the media will not play you these clips, is she gets there first. She tells the cops, you need backup. There's people coming. They're out of control. And you need more effing cops. You need more effing cops. She's upset. That hallway fills up. They start breaking the glass. And you can see on the other side of the glass, there's congressional members out there. And between them is Lieutenant Byrd. But Byrd is hidden in an alcove to the side where Ashley Babbitt went through the window. And I was there. I filmed from there. There's no way she could have seen what was going on there. What she did do that day is there was a guy named Zach Allen who, no, in my belief, 1,000%, he was not a Trump supporter. He's there that day. He has a military helmet. He's breaking the window, pushing the glass, breaking the glass. He's the one that broke the glass that she went through. She tries to stop him. And you'll see other women in this movie that physically tried to stop men and were physically harmed for trying to do that. She grabs Zach Allen, pulls him away. He pulls back. She grabs him again. She throws a left hook. She knocks his glasses off. He has these Buddy Holly glasses. She knocks that off his face just seconds before they yell, gun, gun, and she jumps out the window. And then she's shot and killed. That's her final seconds going down. Ashley Babbitt knew police procedures. She worked security. If there would have been, whenever you do this, you have to show physical presence. You have to verbal stop, before authority. Byrd did nothing. You see him. He hides behind the corner. He hides, and he comes out and he shoots her. That is not police procedure. I've got Rangers. I've got Special Forces guys. I've got 3-letter guys in the movie. They all tell you they've all gone through this. None of them think that was a good shooting. So this is what the government is covering up by purposely lying and saying 5 officers died that day. Then you go to Christopher Wray, who's head of arguably the most powerful law enforcement agency on the planet, the FBI. On that day, in my 20 years, first time you never see a counter protest. Why? Because they were all disguised as Trump supporters and had jobs to do in this rally. Was it a false flag? It was a hijacked operation. It's like you see in the first movie. You have a herd of cows, and we're pushing a herd of cows. You only need to get the first 3 couple of lead steers to turn the whole herd. That's what happened on January 6th. And Antifa was definitely in the crowd, but they were the lowest of the low that day. They were the useful idiots. But Antifa was there that day. We saw them. My military and three-letter buddies saw them. We filmed them. You see people changing out of Antifa clothes into MAGA clothes. Then they run into me and my wife and my daughter. They try to get us to attack the police. We call them out as being infiltrators. They run away, followed by a guy that's all masked up and like this with the thing in his he's like their handler because they run in squads. I run into FBI agents on the ground moments later. My dad was FBI. I'm thinking, oh, the good guys are here. Hey, there's people over here trying to get us to attack the police. You want me to show you who they are? No, we're good. Well, do you want to take a description and report because they're trying to do violence to the cops? No, we're fine. And okay, so that day I thought, well, they must have this all in hand. Situation, they said they're all good, they're all good. No, and then you see the reality, you see what the script was coming out, and then you see Christopher Wray, their boss, testifying before Congress more than once, saying that on that day they saw no evidence of Antifa, BLM, or any anarchist organizations there contributing to the violence. Again, now, either he's the most inefficient, uninformed leader we've ever had at the FBI that can't even look at the videos that are out there or the movie that we made. It's like, you know, Ray, you can send your guys to investigate me and go after me for making a movie that's a terrorist threat to the United States of America, but you obviously didn't watch the movie to see that everything you're saying is false because we showed you in this movie. There's the Antifa guys, there's what they're doing. When he sits before Congress and lies like that, that either makes him really inept or that makes him at least part of the cover-up, if not part of the operation. And when you see him and when you see the Attorney General get before Congress and say, not only do they can't tell you how many undercover FBI operatives or CIs there were assets in the crowd that day, they can't even tell you if there were any. That, again, is a lie. As you see in the movie, the congressman calls him out for perjuring himself. This is, as Ashley Babbitt's mom, Mickey, says, January 6th was the day the United States federal government attacked their own people. They beat them, they killed them, and they put them in prison to shut them up.
Yeah.
Does that answer your long answer to was it a false flag? It really happened. People really did die. It's not like they made that up, but this is a hijacked operation.
No, yeah,
in the intelligence businesses, if you have a spy network and you want to get the spy network coming down, you don't go after and turn every people in the line. You go after the head and you turn the head. Now you've got all these people reporting to you and working for you and doing what you want. That's what happened on January 6th. People didn't know where to go. You know, the fences that went up and said no trespassing, restricted area, those were long gone by the time we got there. Nobody in 30 years of filming at the Capitol, I filmed on the Capitol all the time. Nobody stopped me. It was never a problem. Now all of a sudden that's restricted area. That's crap.
Since you were there, Chris, I want to ask you this because I'm just remembering thinking back to January 6th, hearing a lot of the mainstream media, and I want you to set the record straight on this. We do hear about the Oath Keepers there, the Proud Boys. There was some of those guys got arrested. Were they in cahoots with the FBI? What did you see anything with those guys?
So when you want to take over a country, and you'll see in the movie, in the first movie, we had the story told by a reporter who was in Bosnia Herzegovina during the Kosovo War. And he explained what happened there. And a lot of the same handlers, we believe, did on January 6th. They go into one group of people on this side. For us, it's the left, and there would be the Muslims. And they go, these people are trying to kill you. Why are you putting up with this? You shouldn't do this. You need to stand up for yourself. We can train you. We can arm you. You need to fight for yourselves. Then they go to the other side, and they go to the Christians, or they go to the people on the right, and they say, why are you doing this? These people are against you. We need to help. We can help you. We can train you. We'll give you ways to stand up for yourself. Then these two come at each other, and out of the chaos, they grab power. Okay, so if you look at what happened in Kosovo, it's the same playbook that they did here, and it's the same playbook that they did in Ukraine. So I know Enrique Tarrio, who's now in prison for, 22 years. He wasn't even there that day. Now, Enrique had worked as a federal informant before. He's in Florida. He's Cuban ancestry. He knew how it works. And I asked him after J6, I said, aren't you worried that the FBI has may have infiltrated the Proud Boys? He goes, well, I'm not worried about it. I'm sure they have. He said, that's because that's how these things run. I can't tell you who they are, but I can tell you they're here. Same thing with the Oath Keepers. And it didn't make the final cut, but we interviewed some Oath Keepers who were there because they've been around a while. And most of the Oath Keepers that I knew are ex-law enforcement or military, or both. And they basically, their whole thing is they took an oath to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and the oath didn't come off with their uniform. It's that simple. This is going on since the Tea Party days. Mm-hmm. So was there FBI infiltration into the Oath Keepers? Yeah, I think there probably was. I shouldn't say probably. I know there was, and we now know there was so much infiltration that day that the FBI own agency, for payroll purposes, lost track of how many people were on their payroll that day. That's how bad it was. There's a guy in the movie, Bobby Powell. He is a former Marine. He is an independent journalist out of Michigan. He has footage of and you can see these guys when you're there. They just stick out. These are A-type personalities, either military or professional law enforcement, and they're all tacked out, man. They've got the schmogs around their neck. They are up to here. They've got the dark glasses. They've got the hats pulled down. They've got the wires in here. And these are type A guys. You can see they're not just telling people where to go. They're ordering them where to go. And, you know, it's a crowd. People say, do this, go there. People follow it because it's authority. He catches one of these guys breaking a window. And there's an open door right here. You could just walk through the open door. Why break a window? Why do that? Because you're making a movie, right? So he's breaking this movie and he's pushing people, or breaking this window, and he's pushing people to go through this window. And he tells Bobby to go through the window. And he goes, I won't. I think that'd be illegal. Bobby stands up, turns around. He's got a helmet on because the helmets are mostly worn by the Antifa dudes. So he thought this was an Antifa guy. Bobby stands up. He's an older guy, and he's got press written across his helmet. And he's got the camera like this. All of a sudden, this guy backs off, does a 180, and makes it act like he's protecting that window. And he starts pushing this other Antifa type dude that's coming through here, pushes him away. And the guy's like, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm going to hit you. And the guy goes, okay, peace, and walks away, right? Meanwhile, 20 feet away, there's another guy just like him, only in brown, not black, who's grabbing people and holding the door open and putting people through the open door. Bobby has this footage that, in Bobby's opinion, he's sure those are federal operatives, either agents or undercovers. And he, oh my gosh, it's 2:56. I got to leave in like 2 minutes. He tries showing this. He takes this film to congressmen. He takes to Matt Gaetz. He takes to all these people, shows around everywhere to say, I have proof that there was infiltrators in there, and I think they're federal operatives. Nobody will show this stuff. Nobody takes him seriously. He gets a call from a guy he thought was his friend, former congressman. They go out to lunch, and the guy says, I'll give you $100,000 to lose that footage. And Bobby thinks he's kidding. He goes, no. And he goes, all right, 200, but that's all I'm allowed to offer to you. And he says he's doing it on the behest of a state Republican Party chair. And Bobby goes, I was a Marine. I love my country. They're gonna have to kill me to shut me up on this. And the guy just goes, well, that could be arranged. This is according. Now, a few weeks later, he's down by you in Florida, and he's speaking at a J6 event for Master Sergeant Jeremy Brown. And this trans kid comes in with a backpack of pipe bombs to blow up the stage where he's speaking. So maybe it's just a coincidence, but that's the kind of stuff that's been going on since January 6th. So if the guy wasn't over the target, would he be threatened like that? So
I know you got a roll. So we'll end. Yeah, we'll end the warontruthmovie.com. Chris Burgard. Chris, I hope we can have you on again. Plan something soon because, you know, immigration, the deep state, everything in the kitchen sink, you would be so valuable to have on again and go even deeper in depth on this.
Watch the movie at the warontruthmovie.com. Also go to hisglory.tv and you can watch Capital Punishment for free.
Okay.
Watch both those movies. I'll come back on and we'll tie some more. We'll tie some more of this puzzle together because there's lots of things going on that we can talk about.
All right, Chris, appreciate you. God bless you, and God bless you for coming on here. Thanks so much.
But hey, and while you're at it, go tell all those other libertarians out there, they should be pretty ticked off that they stole the election from Bernie not once but twice. He should have been the nominee.
He should have been the nominee.